A major effect of the coronavirus pandemic has been a huge increase in the number of people working from home. As lockdown in many countries ease out, the question then is, how many employees will still be able to do it when the COVID-19 crisis ends? Some forward-thinking employers globally have taken extra steps to help their employees work remotely during the pandemic, and they've gone as far as saying they may all work from home permanently. It is generally acknowledged that the productivity of Nigerian workers is rather low, and one of the factors that has influenced this in both the public and the private sector in the country's commercial capital city is the famed Lagos traffic. You know what I'm talking about. Or should Nigerian employers also toe this line? Human resource consultant Chika Uwaise will be speaking on the future of remote work. Welcome once again to the morning show.
Thank you.
Good, fantastic. Let's start this way. What feedback have you been getting from both the employers of labor and employees themselves, and how is that going to impact on the conduct of your consultancy post SARS-CoV-2?
Yes, and so a lot of things have been happening since COVID has hit. Number one question I get from my clients is that, how can I switch from most of my staff has been in the building and now I need to figure out how I can do remote working. So that requires a lot of computer, information technology, even cybersecurity, and making sure that the lines are secured as far as technology. So a lot of employers have been trying to figure out how they can get remote, and they've been using systems such as Slack, which is a simple app tool similar to WhatsApp, as well as Microsoft technologies. And then on the employee side, a lot of employees have been asking themselves, how can I transition to remote, or even ask my employer if I could just be remote for some time until things are clear in regards to COVID. So from both sides, people have been trying to figure out how they can do remote, specifically the Nigerian context, because internet is still quite expensive, or data in particular. And so people are also trying to figure out how can I cover this new expense that happens when I am a remote employee.
Okay, let me deal with the question, which is very touchy. I know that it was also talked about before the Zoom became something that almost everyone is using now. You talked about security.
Yes.
I don't know whether to ask you, what are you doing about it, or what is being done about that angle? Because it's very key. People don't want their information to be out there in the public. So what particularly is being done about the question of security?
Yes, and so previously, before I was an HR consultant, I was running an HR software company called TalentBase, so I'm quite familiar with this terrain. And one of the challenges is many Nigerian employers still host all their data on a server, which is actually in a building. So again, that requires people to be there, people to maintain it physically. And now they have to transition to remote, where the data and their information needs to be on the cloud. So luckily, we do have organizations such as AWS, also known as Amazon. Microsoft is here, IBM is here. So these are big technology companies that have already done so much on the cloud, including cybersecurity, and helping organizations to make that transition.
Well, Chika, I wanted to go back to speaking about human resources. And I think often in the workplace, there's this misconception that, or perhaps it's not a misconception, but there's a feeling that human resources are there to protect the business and perhaps not the employee. And at a time like this, have you come across any more people having that same experience where they feel as though usually when there is an issue, they would run to human resources, but at a time like this, it feels as though human resources is they're focused on making sure the business makes it through this time and perhaps not the employees. What do you say about that?
Yes, so unfortunately, as an HR consultant, we're always seen as the bad guys. But to be honest, we are here to advocate for the employees as well. And so quite often, when I'm talking to my clients who are employers, I also advocate for the employee. Number one thing is that if you are switching to remote, there are some expenses that employers are supposed to take care of. Some of these expenses include phone and data and, just their well-being at home, even making sure that they have health insurance, because as we know, unfortunately there is COVID that's happening. And so more employees are worried about their overall health and making sure they're being protected. So even though HR consultants tend to be seen as the bad guys, they are supposed to be advocating for the employees and making sure that their well-being is number one, including this time, and then also helping the business to make those hard decisions, such as, companies are asking, do I need to have all these staff members if I am transitioning to a more remote? Even, what is the phased approach? If business continuously decline, should we have a plan to lay off employees? So that is where HR also steps in for severance packages and making sure that employees are let off. It's done in a good way. A great example of this is Airbnb. They recently announced that they had to lay off 40% of their staff, but they still did it in a very good way, even offering to help their employees to find new opportunities. So I do believe there is a win-win on both sides if HR, employers, and employees work together.
Absolutely. I'm so happy. Sorry, Indy. I'm so happy that you brought up the Airbnb example, because as you said, it was almost half of their workforce. And for the international ones, it felt as though they would give them healthcare benefits up until the end of the year. And for the US ones, they'd give them health coverage for 12 months into 2021. Do you see that happening in Nigeria? Not specifically to healthcare, but businesses having the ability to support their workforce even after they're forced to let them go?
So I really do feel it depends on the type of organization. Obviously, multinationals, bigger organizations such as banks and telecoms do have more of the bandwidth to make sure that they can lay off their employees in a more fair manner. For example, Axis Bank recently announced that they're laying off some of their employees, but they are putting some measures in place to make sure it's a smoother transition. I do feel for SMEs, to be honest, they're living, month to month. And so it is really hard. I have had conversations with some SME owners talking about trying to hold on to their employees as long as they can, even paying them throughout this period. But some of them do have to make that decision quite abruptly and don't have the bandwidth to give these employees a soft landing while they do those layoffs.
Well, they say birds have learned to fly without perching, so hunters have learned to shoot without missing. The emphasis seems to be shifting away from leasing office space to maybe totally not even having one, because of this COVID-19 pandemic. Employees are being encouraged, to work remotely from home. You've been talking about that. We've been discussing that. But in what ways will this, affect output? We're going to come back to you after this break. So we'll keep you on pause. We'll be back in a bit. All right, you're still watching The Money Show. We're still discussing with Chika Uwaise, a human resources consultant. Chika, glad to know that you're still there. I was saying that the emphasis is shifting from, working in the office to working remotely. People are even, some companies are tinkering with the idea of no more leasing workspaces to totally, not even having workspaces at all. So I'm asking, in what ways will this new normal affect employee output? Have you thought about that?
Yes, and so you mentioned earlier, and this is a known fact, that productivity in Nigeria is quite low on the index when we look at it from a global scale. And to be honest, because if you think about it, a typical employee is spending anywhere between 2 to 4 hours every day in one way just to get to work, and then dealing with that same 2 to 4 hours to get back. And that can be quite taxing on anybody. And we know the Lagos traffic can get quite hectic. And so I believe that if employees are given the opportunity to work from home, they're in a peaceful environment, they can make the environment their own, right? And they just have the ability to work at their own pace, and they may not have to get up at 3, 4 in the morning just to get to work on time. So therefore, you're waking up the time that is convenient for you. And if anything, a lot of times remote employees are actually working longer hours because they feel more comfortable at home. So I definitely feel that it's a welcome transition, and I do feel it will help increase employee productivity across Nigeria.
I wonder if we look at different sectors and if we step away from, I guess, the private sector or corporate institutions and look at more informal ones, or perhaps restaurants, more customer-facing roles, how do you think they'll be able to adapt? In as much as we can say that we're looking forward to the end of this pandemic, I do think instances like social distancing will remain part of our society for the long term. And in situations like that, how do you think restaurants would be able to put themselves together again? I just think that we are getting ready to automate our services, streamline our services across the board, but that would probably at the detriment to valuable jobs. So how do you think employers can navigate that new normal?
Yes, and so I do feel that this is going to be our new normal for quite some time, especially because we are still looking for a vaccine. So number one, definitely restaurants will have to think about their layout space. They're going to have to create spaces where social distancing guidelines are in place. I do feel that unfortunately restaurants will take a hit because they may not be able to have as many people in their space as they used to, but we are seeing some creativity. So for example, in Germany, we did see a restaurant that uniquely put a plastic barrier around their chairs in order to create these intimate experiences among people who go to the restaurant. So I do feel that, Nigeria does have a nice tropical weather, and for restaurants that do have some more space outside, they can take advantage of creating more of a layout outside in order to maybe take back some of the space they lost inside. But I do feel like they're going to have to change their layout within. I have noticed a lot of employers have also increased delivery, so we may be transitioning to more experiences in the home. Therefore, delivery is going to be more than key. And there are technology companies that are offering these services as well to create a really good dining experience from home.
Now, Chika, let's talk about issues that have to do with appraisal of staff. What changes should we be looking at and expecting in this new normal?
Yeah. And so I do feel that appraisals, it doesn't really change per se. I think where it's going to change is more of, okay, how productive has this employee been? What's their output? And if anything, I always tell employers to implement systems such as OKRs. And so this is objective key results. And so that you are creating overall goals for the organization and then trickling down to employees and aligning your overall company goals with what the employee is doing. So I do feel that employers are going to have to get really creative in creating goals, guidelines, and making sure that those goals align with the employees so that you're now looking at, okay, what are the results? What are the outputs that you're putting out every week, every month, and every quarter? And I've worked with tons of remote organizations, and they have been doing this quite well.
Well, talking about remote organizations, I wonder, and I'm trying to be as serious as possible, but in a workplace, in a traditional workplace where you have all of these people, all of these personalities, naturally you'll have instances where people could clash and have issues with each other. And again, that becomes the business of human resources. So in a new normal with lots of remote work happening, do you see a natural decline in those types of personable experiences? And is that a good or a bad thing?
So it's quite interesting. I currently work with a remote organization in the U.S. as a consultant, and it's interesting how you would think that some things have changed as far as personalities. Some of these organizations do create opportunities like happy hour. So we get on a Zoom or Google Hangout, and we have time to drink and chat and connect with employers. Some companies have the bandwidth to fly employees out once or twice a year for company retreats. And then, obviously you're constantly doing meetings every week. So you're still connecting with these employees just in a different way. So I feel that at the end of the day, personality shines through, whether it's a phone or through a video. So I don't quite necessarily see it changing. Maybe it decreases in the sense that you don't have to deal with someone every single day. But I have had instances where certain employees clashed and we were a fully remote organization.
Well, I was looking at it the other way, really. Maybe you would talk about that. The camaraderie, for example, at times in the office, people get to celebrate birthdays of colleagues, and with remote working, that won't be in place. You will talk about that, but add this to it. Meetings are now being conducted via technologies like Zoom. Do you suppose this will probably give staff more freedom to express themselves and their bosses less room to loom large over them, as it were, and then leading to what you might call more relaxed, more confident, more creative, and then productive employees?
Yes, and so, of course, Zoom has been the #1 tool when it comes to meetings, but I've also held meetings as well on Google Hangouts. So the truth is you still have a video, right? And at the end of the day, we're seeing you, so as much as you may feel relaxed because you're working at home, we can still read your body language if you're paying attention. I actually know an employer recently that fired one of their employees because of some of the things they were saying on the video chat, and they didn't realize that they were being listened to. So I do realize that people think, oh, I'm on video, I can get away. I think you can maybe get away with not dressing as formal, but at the end of the day, we can still see you on your video. And I'm sure you've seen the viral video of the newscaster that thought, that no one was seeing that he wasn't wearing pants, and he exactly right. So if anything, I do think this is exposing more things. So it has been quite interesting hearing some of the stories of meetings happening via Zoom.
That's quite interesting. All right, let's come down home here. We talked a little bit about it, but let's talk some more about it. Do you think that our environment has room for this kind of work style? I'm talking about Africa, I'm talking about Nigeria. In other words, do you see employers here in Nigeria adopting this method? What are the what you will call extenuating circumstances, why they will not be able to, as you consult, what will you be telling them?
So the #1 issue that we face, everyone faces, is lights, right? And so even if, for example, the remote companies I work with, they actually expense and cover my charges in regards to my data and my phone, and so that is an expense I don't have to worry anymore. And on the other side, because employers do not have to deal with a physical building, some of those expenses they're saving in regards to a physical space they can pass on to the employee. But at the end of the day, the companies I work with do not cover my light bill. So that is a situation that I have to figure out. I do feel that, unfortunately, some companies may not be able to adapt to this because they are working with employees that their light situation is not very clear. Obviously, light is honestly a privilege if we're being real, and so only certain people may have access to 24/7 light. I do think employers are really going to have to think about inverters. I wouldn't advocate for covering the whole electricity bill, but potentially talking to employees about how realistic is their light situation at home, and maybe having solar energy. There are so many companies that are bringing in quite inexpensive solutions around that, to making sure that you're able to actually be online when you need to be.
Let me drop this quickly. What do you fathom will be your greatest, I'm talking about as a human resource consultant, your greatest challenge, post COVID-19, and how you and others in your industry positioning to get ahead of this challenge?
Yeah. So I think the #1 issue we are facing is recruitment, right? And so any organization where recruitment was their bread and butter, we're seeing a dramatic decrease. Many companies have literally stopped hiring people, and therefore you don't have work, right? I've had several clients I was engaging with right up until COVID, and then all of a sudden they, said we're putting a freeze. So I do feel that, us as HR consultants, we do have to change our reality. If anything, we may need to step in and do more consulting in how can organizations make this transition to remote. I think we're going to have to get really creative in that. I'm talking about the future of remote work, but I do feel that for now and for the next few years, recruitment is going to decrease because people may feel that we may not need as many employees.
Right. And in a time like that, I think we're fast running out of time, but in a time like that where people are won't be hiring people as usual, there is definitely a fear that if you already have a job, you definitely want to hold on to that
Yes.
job with both hands. So how can somebody navigate that time and navigate this space effectively? How can someone hold on to their job?
So I always tell people, show your value, right? And there's always so many ways to do that. Number one, talking to your employer, your manager, and just ask them the simple question, what is keeping you up at night? And normally that really starts a conversation around some of the business challenges they may have, some of the issues that they've always wanted to solve and just quite frankly didn't have the time. And now COVID has slowed down time, right? And given more opportunity to maybe work on projects that they wanted to do to improve their efficiency in their business. So I do feel that employees need to talk to their managers about how they can become more valuable, how they can align with where the business is going, and brush up on any skills that you may want to, because you now have more time. You can take courses, you can potentially go back to school, even if it's part-time,
All right,
and really get ahead.
all right, Chika, we'll leave it there for now. Chika
Thank you so
Uwaise,
much.
thank you so much for your time, a human resource consultant. Thank you so much.